We know how academic job security has been eroded in several countries through either rapid privatization or gradual outsourcing. I don't need to delve into that right now and repeat what we already know. But I will say that at the end of the day, what will determine the outcomes depends mostly on our response to these challenges, which also constitutes the topic of this event that we've been looking forward to. We all know the common argument, right? The rise of contingent employment and competitive pressures in research are often viewed as detrimental to collective action in academia. This event, however, departs from a contrary historical reality, that is the rise of collective action in academia. Over the last few years, and surprisingly, despite the pandemic, we have seen a series of academic strikes in the UK, in the US, in France. We have seen an upsurge in Italy, again, even in Germany, where unionized struggle is strained due to a variety of reasons. Countrywide campaigns against fixed-term academic employment have challenged the common assumption that precarious work categorically precludes labor activism. This being said, it would be nevertheless, hard to ignore organizational inability in academia. It is true, and the academic sector is so far marked by a weak record in terms of organized labor. But to ascribe this problem solely to precarious employment would be historically wrong. In fact, I would say academic labor activism has hardly ever existed prior to the current assault on employment security in academia. It may be the case in other sectors that precarity has undermined organized labor in various ways, but in academia, mobilizations against various issues ranging from intersectional inequalities to workplace harassment, etc., have only recently emerged, and they mostly originated from the debates on academic precarity. Therefore, we as the co-organizers thought that the impact of precarity on agency requires a revisit in view of the specific experience of the academic sector, because the common assumptions about the negative impact of precarious work on labor activism do not entirely correspond to the actual historical experience of the academic sector. In actual fact, labor contention in academia was hitherto restrained by the traditional view on academic work as a vocation beyond wage labor. Precarization, I would say, has rather debunked these illusions of exceptionality and triggered conflict. And the recent rise in precarious academics initiatives worldwide actually confirms this. I mean, we're looking at a very promising and heterogeneous type of academic labor activism, which comprises wildcat strikes, unionization attempts, grassroots solidarity networks, and so on and so forth. And I would say it offers an opportunity for anyone who's interested in the question of agency under seemingly unfavorable conditions. And we hope, we three, actually, Annalise could not be here yet, but we hope that this get-together of great scholar activists will contribute immensely to the repository of our collective experience and knowledge in the field of academic labor activism. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first guest speakers, Theresa O'Keeffe and Aline Courtois. I don't know if Aline is already here. Is she? Great.
I'm here. Hello.
Hi, Aline. Hi. So Theresa O'Keeffe is a lecturer in the Department of Sociology and Criminology at University College Cork, where she directs the MA in Sociology of Sustainability and Global Changes. Her research areas include precarious work, feminist movements, gender and protest, and political violence. Her book, Feminist Identity Development and Activism in Revolutionary Movements, was published by Padre. Aline Courtois is a senior lecturer in the Department of Education at the University of Bath. Her research specialisms include elite education, the internationalization of education and student mobility, higher education policy, academic precarity, and academic mobility. Her monograph on Irish elite schools was published by Padre. She has published widely in sociology of education and higher education. So Theresa and Aline will talk about resisting academic precarity via the anti-austerity movement in Ireland, the story of third level workplace watch. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Leslie, and thanks to you for the invitation. We're absolutely thrilled to be here. When Paola, thanks to Paola for putting us in touch, suggested, well, connected us. And we saw the title of the event. We were very excited because we don't often get to participate in conversations that talk about the campus as a site of struggle and academic workplaces as a site of struggle. These conversations often take place in very different contexts. So what we're going to speak about today, if I can share my screen. So I think I do not have permission to.
I'm going to have to make you, or Isoda, can you make Teresa co-host? Wait a second. Isoda, are you there?
I think it works now.
Wait a second.
Yep.
Does it work?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yes, she's the co-host now.
Perfect. Can you see the slides there now? My computer is deathly slow, so it might take me about an hour to get these up on my screen. Right.
I can see the slides.
Okay, you can see partial slides possibly.
Yes, partial. Yes, now it's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay? It's not the full slide. For some reason, it won't share. It won't go into. Let me just see here.
If you press from beginning.
Yeah, that's right. That would do it.
I guess so, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. You'd swear I never used PowerPoint before at this stage. So the title of the talk is Resisting Academic Precarity, the Story of Third Level Workplace Watch. We're going to talk to you today about our experiences of organizing within Ireland and talk about some of the challenges and the victories, I suppose, that we'd like to maybe lay claim to. And I hope without betraying any confidences here, it's great that Paula is on the line because Paula was also a member of Third Level Workplace Watch and might have some stuff to contribute. So I suppose for all of us here, you know, the dream of being an academic, right, is often, you know, we look at this in a romantic way. It's romanticized in terms of, we think about, you know, studying in beautiful buildings and studying in libraries and you know, acquiring knowledge. We think about delivering lectures to enthusiastic students in lecture theaters, going to conferences and sharing our knowledge with colleagues, guiding students throughout the entirety of their learning journey and getting satisfaction for that. And also having tenure, having security. But of course, we know that the reality of that is very far from the dream. And in fact, for precarious workers, the labor that we do within the academy is what we call, borrowing from Anne Oakley's work, the housework of the academy, work that is not necessarily valued. And when we were thinking about our biographies today, to be able to speak to, you know, about our position, our connection to the issue, we were thinking about how our biographies and our own institutional websites really mask precarity. Of course, precarity is masked across all types of institutional structures, not least of which are staff pages, where precarious workers usually don't even get a presence. But even in the telling of our narratives, our own narratives, we tend to mask security. So myself and Aline decided to take a stab at, in the vein of identifying as precarious, and what we're going to make a claim today, that identifying as precarious is a radical act. We rewrote our biographies a little bit to explain our own precarity journeys. So I was precarious for over a decade, worked at multiple institutions. I was up before a labor court to fight for my right to a permanent contract, and suffered a whole range of indignities throughout that period of time, not least of which was not even being ranked really for the job that I was doing and made redundant for. I'll let Aline speak to her own journey here now. Aline, if you wanted to come in.
Hi, everyone. So yes, my name is Hélène Courtois. I'm now on an open-ended contract at Bath, but that took me a while. I also have ample experience of precarious work in higher education across different countries. And my own specialty has been hourly paid work, really. So I've totaled 8 years of that across a number of institutions. So, but this is really to say that we're speaking today as researchers of academic precarity, but also from our lived experiences as precarious workers or former precarious workers, and also as organizers. And for us, I think those three dimensions are very closely imbricated. Next slide, please, Teresa. I don't think I can move them. No. Yeah. So this is some of our work as researchers. So for example, there are those two papers. The one on the left there was, I believe, the first study really of academic precarity in the Irish context. And the other one focuses more closely on the intersection with gender, which came up strongly as well from our findings. There's also this academic blog post. You can see on the right, that's the poster for an event that we organized in Cork 2 years ago, again, on the intersection with gender. And right at the bottom here, that's the description of our current ongoing research project, which focuses specifically on long-term precarity. So people who've been stuck in precarious work for a long period of time. So, but today, so that's the research, but today we thought it would be more relevant maybe to focus more closely on the organizing dimension, even though, as I said, it's all very closely related. So we're going to try and tell you a little bit about the story of Third Level Workplace Watch. So it all began on a bright day in 2013 when Teresa started this Facebook page that you can see here with our logo, the hamster wheel logo. And myself and a few others joined a meeting that she organized, and we decided after a very long chat to become a collective. And we planned from the start to conduct research, to organize precarious workers, and to make the issues of precarious workers visible. We also wanted to connect to other struggles against neoliberalism in higher education and beyond, including student-led resistance. The motivations were multiple. First, we felt that there was really a clear need for a whistleblower, or if you like, a platform where we could make public the dreadful employment practices of higher education institutions in Ireland. So that was one element. We were also keenly aware that there were no conversations, even within our workplaces. There were no conversations, or hardly really, about precarious work. It all happened maybe, within close friendships, but not beyond that. We felt that precarious workers did not have a voice within trade unions, and that really the issues were very significant, that it was not only about employment insecurity, but also a whole range of issues from, pay, conditions, dignity, and respect in the workplace. We also realized that there was no research, there were no data. So anytime we tried at the beginning, to start to initiate conversations on precarity, we were immediately shut down with others telling us, oh, no, that's not really an issue in Ireland, that's not like the States. And we had, no actual data to work from. And of course, I suppose the main driver for us was our personal experiences of precarity. And interestingly, and as time went on in particular, the proportion of migrant women in the group grew. And we believe that has to do with the fact that all those issues were felt much more acutely by migrant women. So in 2013, and because of the lack of data that I mentioned, we launched an online questionnaire, okay? And we did that to collect data, okay, but also to reach out to other precarious people across the island of Ireland. We circulated it through various channels. So we tried, to have as broad a reach as possible. It was also a mix of closed and open-ended questions, because there's a number of things we didn't even know. We couldn't have a fixed employment categories, for example, okay, because everything was so complex. And it was actually the first exercise of its kind in Ireland, focused specifically on precarity. And we obtained about 270 valid responses, and very, very long responses as well, and quite quickly too. So among the major findings that emerged, lots of different things, but in particular, the fact it was gendered was quite striking, with women stuck in precarious work in the most acute forms and for longer. We found that there were, austerity was partly to blame, but actually precarity predated it, because we had people in the sample who had been precarious for, decades at that point. We found lots of evidence that it was completely normalized. I mean, precarity was used and abused by institutions way beyond the kind of, institutional justifications that we've all come across. Other things as well, people started work without really knowing how much they'd be paid, or they'd be told something and then, they'd be paid less in the end. There was no standardization of pay at all, and huge variations within departments even. And the way people felt was, really strikingly, isolation, marginalization, fear, hopelessness, mental health issues, harassment came up as well, poverty was a frequent theme. And on top of that, no sense of academic citizenship, no academic freedom to speak of, and very, very little or no access to union representation. It also turns out that really our logo, the hamster wheel of precarity, was pretty accurate description of the situation for many, in the sense that, the way we're told that precarious work may pay off in the future, that wasn't the case. And for some people, it seemed to be actually the opposite, with, their careers regressing rather than progressing with time, pay never catching up with experience, being way below that for many, fewer and fewer exit points into secure work as time went on. So people being really, really stuck with no other choice than continuing to work on, various contracts or no contracts. Poverty and financial insecurity. Some people were not making minimum wage. In actual fact, many were living below the poverty threshold even. And again, so with no other choice but to keep, scrambling for piecework here and there with no future beyond that.
I'm going to take over here now and talk about some of the different, the additional kind of actions and activities that we did. So one of the first things we did was organize campus actions. So playing on the exaggerated kind of academic vibe there, and thanks to charity shops and Aline's handiwork, we devised costumes that allowed those of us who were afraid to reveal our identities for fear of punishment, risk of losing, being branded as a troublemaker, which came with the real possibility of losing further work. We use this as a way to talk about how difficult it is to speak up about precarity. And so the mask was symbolic of the taboo that is attached to that and the risk that comes with speaking out about your working conditions. And we held a number of actions at different campuses to try and engage, especially with students, to garner their solidarity as well. We held a number of meetings. We held weekly organizing meetings, and despite what the empty chairs might indicate, there were people who did attend our weekly organizing meetings. And we also held regular open meetings. These were open to the public, and it was often around a particular issue that we could discuss. And we also held social events, which we thought were really important to create a space for precarious workers who often had no social spaces even within their own workplaces to come together and to just, talk about their situation, or even just to relax and to be in the company of people who understood what they were going through. We also visited every campus on Ireland to talk about our findings and to hold organizing meetings. Often we did a presentation of our research and then followed up in some instances, quite a few instances, with after, for example, this one in DCU, we had a meeting directly after the presentation with precarious workers to talk about their situation, and we had a subsequent follow-up meeting. We did that on a number of occasions, but I should say that we were inspired by Joe Barry's Metro model of organizing. And we're going to talk about this in the challenges section, but we did not organize in any one particular campus. We tried to build a broader, I suppose, national kind of group. Also because it's really impossible to organize in a particular location because of precarity itself. And so we held our meetings in Dublin city centre. We know that was Dublin centric, but it did allow people to have the comfort to meet off campus, not be seen. And so we did the same with our open meetings, and we did the same with our social events as well. It was only the research meetings when we were going into targeted campuses that we had specific campus meetings, and of course our actions. We also did a postcards from the Periphery project, where we asked people to send in postcards detailing their experience of precarity, and we created a blog and shared it out through social media as a way to get visibility for the situation in Ireland, which people weren't talking about really until we started to really make a bit of noise around it. And we also participated in National Adjunct Walkout Day in 2015. That was organized in the US. We had a number of connections to different groups who were involved in that. And so we encouraged teach-ins here, and there was a mini walkout as well. But we held an event where we talked about the possibility of organizing a walkout in the future in Ireland. We also strove to make alliances beyond academia and to make connections with other precarious workers. And thanks to a building anti-austerity movement in Ireland, we developed some relationships with groups like We're Not Leaving, who were a youth group concerned with forced migration, ELT, which was an English language teachers group that were trying to organize themselves, and sex workers. And we marched together, taking inspiration from the pink bloc that was forming in other European countries, precarious workers. We took inspiration from that and formed our own pink bloc for the May Day march in Dublin in 2015. We also engaged with the media. We put a lot of effort into that, and I suppose it might be we might ask the question whether or not that was actually worth it. We very, very hesitantly engage in a very limited way of very limited form of formal politics. And this is something that the group was always really discussing. There were different, again, things coming together at that time around austerity and trying to get a broad left in Ireland against austerity. And there were kind of political parties who were looking for our support around that. And we were very reticent to actually do that. Here, what we see are a picture of myself and Aline participating in an Oireachtas hearing, a government hearing on inequality in higher education. That's basically about the extent of that. We did work with trade unions. It was a fraught relationship, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but they helped organize some of our events on campus, and they were very delighted with our research, to put it politely, and they used that in kind of their own work to inform their own work. But we do take issue with how they were addressing and responding to the issue of precarity as well, which brings me to the challenges, which would be my last slide here. We disbanded in I suppose it was late 2015, and ultimately precarity itself and forced mobility, I suppose, got the better of us. Most of us took up jobs, precarious jobs, even in other locations. And we were also hampered by the fact that there was a split in Ireland between institutes of technology, university, and colleges, and there was little interaction between them, but also vast differences in some cases in their working conditions. So the ITs have better union representation than universities and colleges. So, in some cases, and depending on the IT that you were at, they might have better working conditions than people in universities and not see it as an issue. So there was a disconnect kind of there as well. The public and private split was a real problem because the private sectors tend to be ignored, even though some of the most acute forms of casualization have taken place within the private sector. And there was a sense that, well, the private sector aren't really academics anyway. But we worked beyond that. And a number of our members, which is the reality of precarity in Ireland, work in public and private institutions in order to make ends meet. The effects of, I suppose, mobility and forced mobility on precarity was really a challenge, again, because people who are precarious are not attached to workplaces for long periods of time, especially those who are most precarious, those on hourly paid work. And so they're moving across different campuses, which is why traditional union structures are problematic. They're moving across cities, across countries. So how do you regularly connect with people that are always forced to be mobile? And so that was an issue. Also, one of the biggest things that we encountered was a shame, was this personal sense of failure by being kind of precarious. There's a stigma attached to it, that it was not seen as acceptable to have more than a certain amount of precarity on your CV. And there was a fear that if one spoke up about one's conditions, and this is still very much the case in Ireland, that you would risk any future employment. And of course, we suffer from resource poverty. There are lots of demands on our time, because a lot of the work that we do when we're precarious is unpaid labor. We're only paid for a fraction of our work. It had impacts on health and well-being, and many of us were also struggling with poverty as well. And I suppose more broadly, and we won't have really time to get into this right now, but maybe this discussion will lend itself to this. But we face a challenge in terms of how academic precarity itself is defined, who sees themselves as A in academic, B as precarious, and how kind of workers even see themselves as workers in the first place was a real problem. So in trying to bring or organize PhD students, we had difficulty in getting PhD students to connect into what we were doing because they didn't see themselves as workers. And in Ireland, they're not recognized as workers for the most part. And so they also didn't see the work that they were doing as precarious work, but more a training. So that raised all kinds of issues. And Alina is going to come in now and talk about the victories that they'll lay claim to.
Yeah. And so despite those challenges, I think we can lay claim indeed to a number of victories. So the main thing is that we really helped kickstart a conversation on the national level about academic precarity in the neoliberal university. And we kind of, forced that in a number of different ways. So there was a campaign, for example, in one university, which was about Save the University. And we kind of, really forced them to include precarity in the kind of different issues they were talking about. So that's one element. Also, there's a number of campuses where groups also started to become active and to share issues about precarity, connecting to local papers, for example. So there was really a national conversation that was started with reasonable social media and media presence as well. We made some unions also take notice and make changes. So, for example, we spoke about precarity at the annual event of one of those unions. One also changed its fee structure, because until then, one of the reasons why precarious workers could join was the fee structure, the kind of monthly payment and so forth. So that was changed in at least one place to help some precarious workers join the union. Also, I think around that time, it's not a coincidence if some unions kind of, use the language of precarity a lot more than they had, and, use our research as well for that. We force universities to start answering questions, even though those questions were not always answered honestly. And there's still a huge amount of denial, but at least, they felt they had to answer. There was the university association that actually published a statement to deny our research findings, but it's interesting that they felt they had to do that. It's one step, it's something. The Koch report, which was a study, actually an official study of precarity in the sector, was also published. And I think, I'm not saying it's thanks to us, but we were really part of the movement that encouraged that to happen. Importantly, we produced data so that we could no longer be told that precarity was not an issue in Ireland. And I think that was useful in all sorts of ways. It was useful as well for individual precarious workers, to understand this is not just an individual problem. And it made the problems visible as well. And based off that, we uncovered a number of issues with the way data was collected, a number of ways that precarious work is made invisible in official data. And we proposed changes to that. And there's at least one workplace where the Athena Swan Committee, for example, and various pilot schemes took some of this on board and are now collecting data on precarious workers in a more, shall I say, honest manner. There was a particularly outrageous job advert that an institution withdrew following our social media campaign, where we publicly shamed them, and they withdrew the ad. So that was also, a small victory. So importantly, as Teresa mentioned, I think we also inspired others, and in particular the English language teachers, and there's some overlap as well with academics in terms of people's trajectories and so forth. But they've been organizing, and we connected with them on a number of occasions. And also, yes, importantly, I think creating a space or spaces in different places for collective support and a community to share issues and grievances. And all in all of that, we hope help to destigmatize academic precarity to some extent. And I think it was really instrumental in that we very kind of visibly and loudly demanded dignity and respect in the workplace. That we spoke up and spoke out in as many channels as possible to talk about, the kind of employment conditions that we had to endure, and that we did that increasingly as ourselves, not hiding anymore. And one of the, maybe I suppose, the significant things that I think were really instrumental in what we did is the fact that we kind of moved from a place of shame, of hiding behind masks, even though that's something we also played with to some extent. We were under no illusion that people didn't know who we were, but it was still symbolically important. But we moved from that, from hiding, from kind of hiding behind signs and masks and wigs, to a place where we felt a lot more confident to collectively identify as precarious workers. And I think the last slide is quite illustrative of that. Teresa, if you don't mind. Yeah, so here you can see this is one of our events, and two people are hiding. And I think Teresa's probably taking the picture, that's why she's not there. But that's quite a nice picture, I think, in that, it kind of shows how far we move from really a place of shame and stigma and hiding to collectively identifying as precarious workers, which I believe in itself, in the circumstances, was quite a radical act. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Aline. Thank you, Teresa. That was really great. We will have enough time at the beginning of the panel In the meantime, Annalise has joined us. Annalise, would you like to say a few words and introduce Eleonora?
Okay. Hi, all. Thank you so much for participating in this event. When Asli asked me to co-organize, I was very pleased because obviously precarity is a growing concern, an urgent concern in academia in the US as well as Europe. So I don't need to spend too much time, but I think it's really crucial that we compare notes and we speak to each other transcontinentally, because academia continues the neoliberal turn, and the percentage of our colleagues, the percentage of teaching faculty in the United States as well as in Europe who are precarious only continues to grow. So I want to thank Aline and Teresa for that really interesting and moving and exciting presentation. Particularly the last part really struck me, how difficult it is to claim the name precarious and what an obstacle it is to organizing when people are not willing to do that. And I think it really speaks to the need to have greater solidarity across the ranks of tenure line as well as precarious faculty, so that stigma is removed. So with that, and again, thanking Bard College Berlin and the Labor and Working Class History Association and Asli and Isuda for sponsoring this event. I'm going to introduce to you, I guess I have 5 more minutes. Should I introduce now or should we?
As you prefer.
Asli, should I introduce Eleonora or should we take a couple of minutes?
We will have enough time at the beginning of the panel for discussions and questions. So I would say let's move on to Eleonora, and then we will have even more time for discussion.
Okay. All right. So let me introduce the second part of the day. And the next speaker is Eleonora Priori, who is a PhD student in economics and complex systems at the University of Turin. Her research interests cover both economic, epistemic issues and some applied works. She focuses on the role of public policies in contrasting inequalities, particularly as long as the labor market and public education are concerned. She has been always engaged in the struggles for public university. She now belongs to Università Manifesta, a network of precarious workers proposing a manifesto to rethink the university. Eleonora, thank you for being here today.
Thank you to you, Annalise. And first of all, good afternoon to everybody. And thank you to all the organizers of this event, in particular to Asli and to Paula, who put us in contact. And I'm very happy and honored to be here today, because I'm strongly convinced that events like these are crucial today more than ever, to share our experiences and our perspective, and to build together some tools to defend the public university. And I think that we do this not for ourselves, but for everybody, because I think that defending the university today means to defend a fairer society tomorrow. And so I think that being here is very important today. So thank you for everybody, to everybody for dedicating this afternoon and her afternoon to this important meeting. I belong to a network of precarious researchers, which is called Università Manifesta. We are born during the pandemics, and today I would like to share with you something about our experience. We wrote a manifesto to rethink the academic systems, and we started from our individual experiences as precarious researchers, and we looked for the contact points of this experience to find the similarities and the differences. And what we found is that every single dimension that hits us and damages us as precarious researchers is itself a damage for the university system and for the academic system as a whole, for the teaching activities, for the quality of the research, and in a word, for the knowledge itself. And so we've been very impressed by this idea that what hurts us as precarious people is actually also a huge problem for the system, for the students, and for the academia in general. So we have looked for the theoretical and political underpinning of the nowadays academia, which are those of the so-called neoliberal academia. And we have reviewed the most relevant reforms through which these underpinning have been implemented in the Italian system and in the Italian academia over the last 30 years, and in particular in the last 10 years after the Gelmini reform. The so-called Gelmini reform, which has been an important and terrible reform of the university system in Italy, and has been approved 10 years ago, in 2010, 11 years ago. So we have done this review to reflect on the distance between the nowadays academia and the academia that we want, and the academia that we want to build, and to provide us with some tools to subvert those underpinning and build the academia that we want. So our manifesto is divided in 3 sections, and each section has in its first part a critique of the current model, and in the second part some proposals. Some of them are also very practical, to give the direction to which we should move, and we would like to move. So section 1 is devoted to the role of didactics. Section 2 discusses the limits of precarious work, and in the third section we have faced the topic of the evaluation system, because we believe that the mechanism of the evaluation systems are crucial in defining how the academia works. So in section 1, while discussing the role of didactics, we have harshly criticized the corporatization process of the academia, which comes from the neoliberal transformation of the university, of course. And we believe that this corporatization process has pushed the academia institution towards the market demands, with several drawbacks, because by one side we have observed the qualification of the teaching activities, which is also connected with the precarious work, of course. But by the other side, we can also observe an immense loss in terms of the pluralism of the knowledge, because the idea of pushing to the market system the production of knowledge as this kind of consequence. So as a consequence, we have a huge gap between the applied and the basic knowledge, as the former responds better to what the market and the private interest demand. And the knowledge itself is shaped to respond to a certain norm, which is that of the white and male men, probably the heterosexual, wealthy white and male men, with just some rare exception, but the knowledge itself responds to this kind of norm, and therefore we have a huge loss in terms of pluralism of what we could teach and research about in the academic system. And this is, of course, a consequence of this corporatization process. What we propose as reply to this model of the didactics is instead a model which puts at its center the democracy and the critical knowledge. And we believe that to do so, we have to liberate the university from its linkages with the private sector. And to do so, of course, we need public financing because the problem generating this situation is that the private sector feeds through its financing the university, and I think we believe that this tandem should be set away, and we should promote a model founded on the public financing. Furthermore, we believe that teaching courses should be founded on an organic planning, and this could be achieved only by abolishing the precarious contract types, because I cannot have an idea of planning my teaching activity in the long run if my contract is going to expire in a few months. And last but of course not least, we strongly believe that the university must be effectively affordable for everyone, independently on her economic and personal situation. And this is a strong point that we should work on. Sorry, I was just a bit. Section 2 focuses on the role of precarious work, and while discussing these topics, we have reflected on how the precarious work is strictly connected with the idea of that precarious workers are blackmailable. So the lack of economic protection feeds the model of the economy of the promises, and it asks precarious researchers to work more and more at any condition, and this undermines the freedom of research and of teaching, because we are, as researchers, we must reply to something that is asked to us, and we have to follow that way. So this build a system where the publish or perish mechanism is the filter for our career advancement, and therefore we have a kind of blackmail in our careers. So just think that only one person out of 10 of 10 people achieving a PhD will have a tenure position in the long run, while the other 9 are going to be expelled from the university system. So to face this situation, we believe that we should rethink the pattern of the academic career, and in particular as long as the junior researcher positions are concerned. And we believe that the university system should abolish every kind of precarious contract type to guarantee a long run planning to the research projects, but also to the researchers themselves. And we also believe that the introduction of contractual safeguards cannot be no more set on in the time. So the last section of our work is devoted to the evaluation system, and we have decided to do so because the evaluation system is a crucial mechanism which rules the access to every kind of resources. Just think to journal publication and citation, but also to job position. And well, the evaluation mechanism is of course the one which rules everything in our life as researchers. So the legacy of the reforms of the last 30 years in Italy, by one side, has dramatically reduced the resources available, cutting many financing, both in terms of teaching and in terms of research. We have lost many research lines in these 10 years and in the last 10 years, but the situation has been very negative starting from 30 years ago. And in particular, the Gelmini reform, which is the reform of 2010, has given more power to the evaluation system to orient the research by applying meritocratic rhetoric, and it also implemented some performance indicator which actually reflect only the palatability, market palatability criterion, and it feeds a precarious vicious circle through the public or perish mechanism. Well, our manifesto proposes an evaluation model which is made of opposite principles, as we believe that at the center of the evaluation model. We believe that the evaluation should not reflect a competitive dynamics, but should be founded on a collaborative dynamics, which should be oriented and should be aiming at implementing the quality of the research products and of the research itself. As long as some technical and practical proposals are concerned, we believe that to make the evaluation system more democratic, non-tenured researchers should be involved in the evaluation process itself. But we also believe that the evaluation should apply some multidimensional criteria, as we as researchers actually we don't do only research, but we are also involved in teaching activities and other kind of services, and this should be included in a multidimensional criterion of evaluation to guarantee career advancement also to those who work precariously in the university to go on. And in the end, we also believe that an accountability principle should be included in the evaluation system, because this would make the evaluation system itself more transparent. So this is our manifesto, and these are the basic lines we propose for the university that we would like to build together. And thank you for listening. And if you have any question, here I am. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eleonora. That was great. I will have a lot of questions afterwards. But first, Isoda should actually introduce Peter Ulrich. Isoda, are you there? Or have you left us already? Because Isoda had also problems with her internet.
No, I'm here, but I have trouble. If you could be so kind as to introduce, or I'm very sorry.
Of course, I'd be glad. So our next guest speaker is Peter Ulrich, a comrade of mine from the Network for Decent Work in Academia in Germany. Peter is a sociologist and senior researcher in the research unit Social Movements, Technology, Conflicts at the Technical University Berlin, and fellow at the Institute for Protest and Social Movement Studies and the Center for Research on Anti-Semitism. He works also as a consultant for the scholarship department of Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. He is one of the founders of the Network for Decent Work in Academia, and he publishes, among others, on academic precarity and organization of the academic precariats. Peter, we're very happy to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the invitation. And I have to start with an apology. I already mentioned this in the beginning that I'm on parental leave and there's COVID and all that. So I kind of tried to keep that a little low profile and just made some bullet points to talk about several issues that I think are important when trying to describe our network. And the good thing is that much of what I'm going to say has already been said by others before, because there seem to be very, very many similarities across countries. My outline, I will briefly talk in the beginning about what is the problem that we face in the German academia. Secondly, also briefly, what are the structural conditions for organizing labor in this field? And my main point, the slightly longer part, will be about our network for decent work in academia, what we want, what we do, the challenges we face, quite similar to what has been presented before. Concerning the problematic conditions that we deal with or that we fight against, the structure of higher education employment in Germany, I would say it is shaped by the simultaneity of or the simultaneousness of the non-simultaneous. First, there's the objectification of social relations in academic capitalism. Second aspect is the very strong personal dependencies of academic feudalism. Thirdly, a field which follows specific rules, which I, relating to Pierre Bourdieu, will call the illusion of the field. Just some words on these three aspects that shape the situation that we consider very much problematic. Academic capitalism entails the introduction of new public management techniques into higher education management, the prioritization of evaluation and audit systems, universities striving to optimize their numbers, totals of students, research funding, publications, and so on. Competition has become the directive standard in nearly every aspect of academic life in Germany too. With regards to employment, this has led to a situation of extreme or most extreme competition for jobs, which is especially intensified by what I call the overproduction of early career research. I don't know, it's not a very good term, but this is the situation that we face. But the overproduction of early career research, most of whom have no prospect at all of ever getting a permanent position within the system. And this problem is secured by three things. The first is the immense growth of third-party funding, which always goes along with project jobs, not permanent positions. And the second is the focus of these expenditures on early career researchers. So there are indeed many opportunities, jobs, grants, etc., for doctoral research and also for postdocs, but there are no long-term career paths. So about 90% of academic staff is on fixed-term contracts with low chance of ever getting tenure for most of them. And this all has got to do a lot with a specific law regulating employment in the German academia, the Temporary Employment in Higher Education Act, that infringes heavily on labor rights that are guaranteed in other spheres. Because in Germany, in every other work field, fixed-term contracts can only or cannot be extended endlessly. They can only endure for up to 2 years. Then you have to get a permanent contract. This is different in academia. You are allowed to have fixed-term contracts for up to 12 years and none afterwards. So afterwards, these are not they are not legal. So this forces highly qualified academics to drop out if they don't avail of one of the few professorships that are there. This brings this law close to legalizing an occupational ban on researchers that have been in the university for 12 years. So this is the aspect of academic capitalism, very roughly. And now to the feudal structures. With this term, I allude to the strong personal dependencies that are characteristic of German academia. A German system compared to, for example, the Anglo-Saxon academic systems is extremely hierarchical. Money distribution does not usually come for the strengthening of the academic community, but it depends highly on the reputation, the status, and the bargaining skills of individual professors when they are hired. So they are in consequence entitled to virtually own a certain amount of resources, including staff. And when they leave, they kind of they are dropped also, or I have to leave with him or with her. This situation leaves academic staff in a threefold dependency on professors. They are first formally employed by them, they are kind of the institution that employs them, while at the same time remain in an existential position of qualification under the same professor's supervision and grading, also a German specificity, not to differentiate between those functions. So supervisors are also those who grade, in most of the cases, who also grade PhDs and so on. So most of mid-level researchers' prospects are highly reliant on the support or the lack thereof of one person. And just quickly, some words on the academic illusio. The illusio, as Bourdieu calls it, of the academic field are the rules every one of its players has to accept, or the rules one even has to believe in, to give taking part in this field some meaning. And part of the academic illusio is based on the relevance of substantialness, on knowledge, academic discourse. However, the commodification of the system, as I described earlier, gave way to replacing this fundamental mode of academic argument and progress. I'm talking about critique, debate, and so on, replacing this with a new mode with competition. The ubiquity of funding, which is distributed competitively, creates the impression that the system is meritocratic. But we know from many studies that this impression is unfounded. Still, everyone acts, however rational this may be on the individual level, everyone acts as if academia was meritocratic. So most academics believe it pays out to go the extra mile, something that also keeps them away from activism. And with this, I'm coming to my second part. As I said, I can only give some bullet points on these structural conditions, but for those who are interested, I can post the link to the paper where one can read it. By the way, Asli, you can use this in your article as the correct citation now, because you had the version that was not printed on.
Well, I will talk about it once you're finished. You guys need to know what he's talking about. I'm criticizing him. That's fine. Go ahead. You will get your turn.
As I said, I can only give you the bullet point because my talk is actually, I want to focus more on the network itself, but I at least want to mention these points that I think are relevant conditions for organizing the field, or as one could also say, impeding conditions, conditions that impede on organizing, on making people become politically active in the field. The first thing is that the level of trade union organization is very low. Many reasons, we may talk about several of these aspects later on, but there's quite a distrust amongst academics, and there's not a very good organizing capability on the side of the unions. Second aspect, there's also a lack of alternative structures for handling the conflict, a space our network is at least trying to fill a bit. So this lack, I think, may be getting smaller. Thirdly, the conditions for employment themselves are ill-suited to activism, and they impede active representation of interest. I mean, just think of having a 6-month contract. Of course, it's not a very good condition to, for example, be elected for self-governing bodies and universities. You can't even apply to be elected because you have gone until the next elections. And of course, academia itself, I would say, is hostile towards other activities like care and activism. If you want to be successful in academia, you have to spend all the time you've got available. Fourth aspect, as I already said, the threefold personal dependencies of professors foster something like you might call moral cowardice or something. So it was already mentioned in the beginning by Teresa or Aline. Many are very shy and well adjusted to the system and don't feel good in speaking up and organizing for their interests because they're afraid of being driven out of the system. The fifth aspect is that the Homo academicus is characterized by a self-entrepreneurial subjectivity. I mean, if you are in constant competition, what you actually do not learn all day is acting in solidarity and working on collectivities. So this is something that has to be pushed from somewhere else, from self-organization, but this is not something that comes naturally within the academic system. Sixth aspect, the group of those affected is also internally highly differentiated. So amongst those more or less precarious researchers on fixed-term positions, you've got those quasi or almost profs, but you also got what we call teaching slaves, a little bit ironically or sarcastically, that have, for example, teaching loads of up to 24 hours a week with their position. Of course, they don't have time to read the text that they are going to talk about in the seminars. And this these internal differentiation also are bad for fostering solidarity. And this problem repeats itself when we talk about relations between academic staff and students and technical or managerial staff. So there's much sense of being something better, something higher amongst the academics. And last thing is the diffusion of responsibility between the federal state level and the state levels and the institutions like universities. That makes it very hard to find the central arena to fight for your interests, because there's very much diffusion between them, or they are all the time saying, well, the other one is responsible, the other one is responsible, and this is really problematic for organizing. And also the same on staff level. I mean, there are, for example, many professors who would support our demands, but at the same time neglect their own responsibility, their own room for maneuver. So this makes it sometimes hard to achieve the smaller steps that are not on the level of changing the whole system. So to cut the long story short, despite high levels of suffering, an organized academic precariat is what my colleague Simon Teune and I once called one of the unlikely mobilizations. But we organize in our network on decent work in academia. We formed on a workshop on one of those many conferences on the problems of academia and progressive visions of academia or whatever. And we were one small working group that was talking or thinking about the idea of a nationwide strike in academia against those employment conditions that I described. But we quite quickly found out that all of the conditions necessary for organizing such a nationwide strike were not given. For example, there was not no infrastructure of or not even a list of all those actors that would be relevant in organizing this field. So this is what we actually did. The first thing was to collect all those groups and initiatives and unions and the like, and get in touch with them and organize in the end a mailing list and a meeting where they could come together and formulate a common vision, or at least a network structure to organize. This happened in January 2017. We founded the network, kind of paved the way for basic formal, or better informal, you better say informal structures, and our core demands. Our core demands are, I think there are two core demands and several around this. The two core demands reflect the two basic problems I mentioned in the beginning, the academic capitalism and the academic feudalism. So one is related to decent work. We want to end the endless, sorry. We want to end the reliance of the German system on these endless fixed contracts. That means we want to abolish this law that allows this. And the second demand focuses on democratization. So this is especially focused in our wish to end the chair system and to replace it with a democratic department structure. Yeah, what do we do? I won't go into details here. We do protests. We write about the problems. We organize individuals and groups. So we organize protests. We campaign whenever there are certain things that open windows of opportunity to make our demands heard. One of the biggest current projects we do is an evaluation of this bullshit law. I have to read this title again. I like it so much in English. The temporary, I always forget it. Well, you know what I'm talking about. This temporary higher education.
Academic employment law.
Yeah, exactly.
The fixed term academic employment law. Wissenschaftszeitvertragsgesetz means fixed term.
Yeah, you should hear this German one word. Wissenschaftszeitvertragsgesetz. It's one word. And we currently do an evaluation of this law, unlike the ministerial evaluation, which just evaluates the effects of a small reform of this law on the length of contracts. But we want to analyze this more holistically, including all the effects it's got on academic staff, on science, on the way academia develops, on all the impacts on a personal and political level it's got, and so on. The network has quite a loose structure. Basically, the idea was to connect local groups. There are local mid-level researchers initiatives in many universities, in scientific associations, and so on. So we wanted to basically connect these groups, but there are also individuals, which is a very natural thing, because it's very hard for people to continuously organize in one city, for example. So one way to keep them in touch with the network is to also organize individuals. There's a coordinating committee. There's an internet platform, Slack, something like an intranet where we communicate and organize things. There are annual meetings to decide about core demand, structural aspects, and so on. And the network is quite a success story, because I would say basically we could alter, or we were part of altering and radicalizing the discourse on the problems that I've been talking about. In the wake, or in the following the foundation of this network, there was a wave of the founding of new initiatives in several universities that were inspired by the examples that were now more publicly known, and by the knowledge that was now made available or accessible through our network. We've had quite a good press resonance. Whenever there's, we are asked by the journalists whenever there's something concerning, or not whenever, but often. We've had a very great campaign together with the two unions organizing this field, more or less, the GEW and Verdi, where we were successful in putting our problem definition on the agenda. It was about an initiative to spend some billions for the next couple of years in academia, and there was not one single press article without mentioning our demands, and our demands were all the jobs created with this money should be permanent positions. We were not successful in the end in establishing this. It was only in the end in the preamble and as a general aim of this thing, but at least it was a discursive success. We are also important, as I said, is something like a social movement memory, an important function to collect experiences, to try to share this, but this also, we don't do it as good as we should. We should, and I think, or this is what the local initiatives also want, invest more in being this hub of collecting knowledge and sharing it again and so on. So there are several challenges. The last thing I'm going to talk about, just also in loose sketches. The relation to union, again, to the unions is a bit problematic. As I said, academics are kind of alienated from the unions traditionally, having a lot to do with their habits or habitus and with their I don't know, their modes of distinction and whatever, but also the unions are not very successful in this field, which is hard to organize, and they're maybe also not creative enough to spend too much energy in this field. We have a problem, or a challenge at least, with internal democracy. I said there are loose structures, so there's the danger of the tyranny of structurelessness, of course, to be seen. We don't have very formal ways to decide upon things. There are some, but we are lacking this. I mean, we struggle with the precarity of the organization. Someone once put it like this: we are a precarious network of precarious initiatives of precarious researchers. So the problem of precarity is doubling and tripling. The general problem of the low bargaining power is the problem that we have as a network too. We are not very big. I mean, there are about mid-level researchers initiatives at about 30 universities, but there are 600 universities in Germany, and so, or universities and universities of applied sciences, which is a different thing in Germany. So the size is a problem, and this results in us having had only symbolic successes until now. For quite a time, we've also had a very narrow focus. We were dominated by white German postdocs. This has been under discussion a lot in the last 2 years, I would say, and resulted in focusing more on aspects of discrimination, intersectionality, focus on the many non-Germans in German academia, and resulted in a new demand in our list of demands against intersectional discriminations, and also especially in the funding of our sister organization, the Precarious International, which Asli can talk more about. But this focuses on this organization focuses on the non-German academics, the non-German speaking academics especially. Still, there are also too many people organized in our network from the humanities and social sciences. The coordination committee is sometimes acts more like an own group and not like coordinating the whole network and things like this. So there's still a lot to do internally and concerning our aims, but we achieved a completely altered discourse, a wide recognition of the problems that are tormenting us. We activated individuals and groups, so wish us much luck that we can survive and grow despite the bad conditions, because we struggled against the very conditions that make it hard for us to struggle. So as I already said, we are one of these unlikely mobilization. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Peter. That was a very good descriptive summary of Network for Decent Work in Academia. This thing is, I had just recently criticized Peter in an article, so that's why he's given me a hard time. I called his work descriptive, so he's still a bit resentful. That was great. So while you were talking, a question came from Paula, and I would like to read it for you, Paula, because I guess you can't use your mic here because you're in a public space. So Paula thanked Aline and Teresa and said it was great and emotional to listen to their presentation, which I can understand. And she also thanked Eleonora for sharing the content of the Manifesto Universitatea Manifesta. She has a couple of questions. First of all, the manifesto that Eleonora talks about is an important document, says Paula, because it does not only analyze the state of the art of employment in the public universities in Italy, but also proposes a reform of the employment system in public universities. It is very detailed, and Eleonora has done a lot of work to think of an alternative contract framework and career progression for researchers and academics from the PhD upwards. And Paula is wondering if Eleonora could tell us a bit about the context in which this document was produced. What has been the response of other precarious researchers? That I would like to know as well. By the way, I wanted to ask that too. And how was the manifesto received? Also, I want to know how it was received by tenured professors, for example. So I combined my question with Paula's. Eleonora.
May I add another question? Is there an English version of the manifesto?
Sorry, we don't have an English version yet, but we are going to produce it. And maybe I should thank you for inviting us today here, because it could be the right stimulus to produce the English version. So I promise you that we will do it as soon as possible. And sorry us for not having done it yet. And this as long as concern the last question, which was the easy one. As long as concern the context in which the manifesto has been produced, as I was mentioning before, we are a small collective of a few peoples. Actually, we are across different university. Someone is in Rome. We have another boy, another guy in Pisa. I come from Turin. So we are very heterogeneous, also as contract types, some PhD, some precarious researchers, postdoc, and things like that. The context, the general context of the writing down of the manifesto was that of the pandemic, but also a period of time where in Italy there was a discussion about a new reform of the university, which has been it is implemented in these months, but it does not move a lot in terms of mobilizations and in terms of the mediatic aspects of the people discussing this reform. Therefore, there is something changing, and this is something which is changing through this new reform under discussion is nothing of good, and is nothing which is going to better off the situation, because there is no political intention of putting some financing of the public university, and furthermore, where there is some idea of financing, this goes towards the direction of the private sector, with things like industrial PhDs and things like other things like that. So the context is very is terrible, definitely. As long as concern the reception of the manifesto, and in particular the reception by the tenured position people, we did not receive all this enthusiasm about our proposal. Curiously, the manifesto is having a good answer in terms of people reading it and commenting it, but it involves precarious researchers, but it does not find favorable answers from tenured professors, to be honest. And so this is the general context. I hope to have answered to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleonora. Georgiana is raising her hand, as I can see. Georgiana, hi.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Wonderful. First, thank you very, very much for organizing this. This is really, really wonderful. I think not merely for the research and the perspectives, the international perspectives presented, but actually, as someone said earlier, for what it means to the individual, to someone like me who, and I'm sharing personal information now, I at some point just got traumatized in academia, and actually literally. And I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't know what to do with what actually some of you called fear of repercussion. And I didn't know my positionality. So believe it or not, whatever it has been described today as, fear to being perhaps laid off or not renewed in case one is an activist, I didn't know that was going to be. So I just faced it like full face smashed on the ground, and I learned how actually aggressive and even violent the institution can be in front of someone claiming rights, claiming what their perspective is, right? So now to the question I wanted to ask you. I decided from this position, since I came back again on one of those prestigious grants, is a Marie Curie, the kind of fixed employment I have, but yet prestigious. The typical employment that actually hides behind its prestige the fact that it in fact is just part of the same chain of precarious type of work. It may look fancy, but we know that I have zero guarantee of what's next for me afterwards. So I decided from this position to use my privilege now to make a documentary where I actually just, like someone said earlier, declare full face, put a human face on the situations that we collectively face. And what I wanted to ask you about is about the fear element. So I'm going through with it. I'm writing the script. I would like to actually open the invitation to anyone who today spoke, and Asli, first of all, whom I contacted about it, in case you want to join voices. And don't leave me alone, please. But the fear element, I was wondering, how should we make it? Should we make it with a mask like La Casa de Papel? Are you familiar with the series? And just take them off? Or how is fear working for you? I'm asking it personally and professionally. For me, it's an element that I understand. It still destabilizes me. And so it makes me question, since I'm a philosopher, how can we think our societies and our learning environment is free of coercion and free of arbitrariness to a sufficient degree for us to do our jobs, when in telling the truth, and by the way, being a philosopher means exactly that, you are concerned with the truth. if that is something you cannot actually do without fearing. And so I declare I fear. I wanted to ask you who presented today, how do you deal with that? And is it my personal feeling, or do you collectively share this kind of, threat in case you just show your face as a precarious, show your personal point of view on how things should be done, etc., etc. So thank you so much for today and for so much space. I'm sorry if I took too long.
Thank you, Georgiana. I'm so sorry, Catherine. I just wanted to say, after Georgiana, Sarah, and then Peter, and anyone who feels addressed with regard to fear, please go ahead. Peter, Ulrich, Eleanor Priori, Theresa O'Keefe, Aline Courtois, what do you think about the element of fear?
May I just, may I also answer to the question of fear? Hi, I think, Asla is smiling. This is one of the big, we even had this mask. We had a thing with masks anyway. That just made me, we'll talk about it later.
We had it in Precarious International.
With that, like literal masks, not figurative. So the question about fear is that it's obviously whenever people talk about tenure, they talk about how it will make professors feel secure enough to speak their minds about their profession, to tell whatever they need to say in class, in their work, in their research. So from the beginning, that tenure was discussed in the States, everybody knew, and also in Europe, everybody is aware that you speak your mind when you feel secure. And bosses around the world, employers around the world have always known that the biggest way to keep the labor force in check is to make them fear that they're going to lose their jobs, that they're going to have repercussions. And this is the environment where all kinds of abuse also, fostered. So they know that. That's exactly why they create this environment of fear. And the best way to create an environment of fear is to divide us into individuals and to make us feel alone. You've asked so many times whether you were alone in feeling this fear. Absolutely not. Every single one of us felt it. Every academic that has ever been in a precarious situation has felt it, along with all the other workers, I think, around the world. So even doubting that, even not being aware that everybody else is sharing our fear shows how successful they are at dividing us. How do we deal with this fear? I have one answer for myself. Asking people to be brave in the face of this fear, coming out, doing stuff is the wrong answer, because they'll get fired. They will get punished for that. The only answer is solidarity. If we do it together, that's when we won't get punished as easily. But if you ask people to come forward, be brave, fight on their own, or like two people in an institution, you know how that ends most of the time. So our only option is to get together, is to organize. And from there, I just want to say that in the first presentation, Elena, I was so inspired by the multitude of actions that you engaged in. I was like, absolutely, why don't we do this? Why don't we go from campus to campus? I'm not talking about publishing or talking or getting together and meeting. No, actually visiting campuses. It was just such a brilliant, and once you said it, it was so obvious. Something we don't do, right? Yes, because of the pandemic, it's kind of impossible these days. But generally, it's not something we do. We don't visit each other and there are so many ways of doing this. The media angle, the visitations, the research and publishing on this issue, all the presentations that brought together these labor activism, engaging with trade unions, explaining precarity and gig, things to labor unions so that they can include this kind of labor, reaching out to student unions, reaching out to, all kinds of allies. But I think in the end, the most important thing, and I'll just end with this, is that we make each other aware that we're not alone in this fear, and then we don't have to be alone in this fight. So thank you so much. I'm one of the co-organizers, so saying this sounds a little weird, but I have not been so inspired in a long while by all the presentations. This just made me so happy because of that. It should make me feel depressed, but honestly, I know the situation already. So the fact that you all are doing such amazing work just really inspired me. Thank you.
So if the speakers want to respond to Georgiana's comment on year, please do. If not, Sarah, Noor, and Petar and Annalise just winked, but were you raising your hand or did you?
That was just an applause emoji supporting what Isuda just said.
All right.
I want to reply to this, but I can reply after Sarah, Noor. There's no problem.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I have a different question.
Okay, so on this fear thing, the first thing that came to my mind when you said Georgiana, you are talking, or you are making a kind of documentary, if I understood that correctly, showing your personal face, your personal miseries and fears and so on. It reminded me that we in our network were at a certain point fed up with these personal stories because we've had loads of them. I don't know, of course, the discourse is different in different countries, but we've had so many journalists looking for someone they can portray, someone whose misery they can tell in a sad story. And it is something that at a certain point, we said, no, we don't want this anymore. Or most of us just didn't want this anymore. So we are also experts on our situation. We are researchers. We have a political and social analysis, structural analysis. We have demands, and this is what we want. We don't want this to be reduced to things that look like individual life causes or whatever. But this is one aspect. Arguing again or going out against the fear, there are several strategies that have come into being in the last couple of years. One is it has become more and more common to be open about the situation of your employment. So there are people who start their seminars by making transparent under what conditions they are there. So because usually as a student, I think, will just think the guy or the professor or the whatever researcher talking there, he's somehow employed by the university, has got a position and is just doing his or her work. Now that's very often not the case. Many just have this one seminar that they earn money with, and so there are very different conditions. Many have a contract only until the end of the seminar, but it does not include the time when they grade the work to be done in there and so on. So what they do in the first session, they say, what are my working conditions? And they make this transparent. Another thing is, this is kind of more the thing I chose, you can, of course, also make your activism and your speaking out against these conditions. You can make it a matter of distinction and of your own performance, I'd say. So by speaking out publicly, by publishing in this field, by kind of giving yourself an expert position on this, you are not just the person complaining about their own suffering, but you are also someone who's visible with a certain position, and this can pay out, but it is difficult. But my impression is that in the German system, the fear is much stronger than the possible effects of speaking out, because not everyone knows everyone, and everybody talks to everyone, that you never have a chance to get a position anywhere else because you were not friendly enough to your professor or so on. I think for many, the fear, as I perceive, is too strong, but the bigger problem is that fear is, in my opinion, not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that people don't think they have time to organize, to do something. They they support, they are very active on Twitter, they are very active on Facebook, and they are very active in, I don't know, sharing messages and so on. But when we do a demonstration, they say, oh, I couldn't make it. There was this paper I had to write and this and that. And this is a much, much stronger problem in my perspective. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Sarah, before you take your question, actually, Aline wanted to reply to Georgiana, because Georgiana's question was directed at all speakers, and Aline wanted to add something on fear, and then we can take your question. Sorry to keep you waiting for long.
No, it's not really a proper reply, I suppose, but just I was thinking, well, first of all, what Peter described with journalists is something we struggled as well, and try to, kind of establish ourselves as experts rather than just, sub stories that we have the very same experience in our work. But about fear, I suppose as well, there's a difference. I remember thinking at some point when we started this that at that point I didn't really have a job to be sacked from, because there's fear, and then there's, situations where you may feel that you actually don't have that much to lose, because prospects are so bleak. And I remember that at some point I distinctly thought that personally I was very much in that space. But the other thing that I remember very clearly is that whenever we went on a campus, with our masks and whatever story, whatever action we were, planning for that day, the main feeling, really, the main emotion was not fear, it was excitement. It was really exciting, it was really empowering. And I think that was a great motivating factor for all of us in the group. So just wanted to say that.
Thanks a lot, Eileen. That was, I totally agree that action is totally enlightening and empowering. Sarah, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, no problem. My question is for Eleonora. What are the statistics for academic workers in Italian universities? And by the way, I am officially affiliated with an Italian university, even though I've never been to that university. I work from the distance. It's University of Florence or Firenze. Anyway, but I know nothing about Italian academy. I'm in Berlin still. And what is the percentage? We keep saying, among German academia, we have 8% of workers have permanent positions. Those are the professor. And the rest are on fixed contracts. What do you have similar statistics for Italian university and academic workers? Second is I quickly looked on the internet about this 2010 reform bill in Italy, and I did notice that what was interesting was there was like this response by the Galmini, I think, the person who was responsible for this, Galmini, who's responsible for this, and the thing was, there are so many benefits, including 6-year single mandates for directors. And get this, I love it. It reminds me of German academia, the same discourse. Meritocratic tenure tracks for academics, including a maximum of 6 years of fixed term contracts for entry-level assistant professors who must either obtain tenure during this time or leave the academy. Yeah, so you have that too, apparently. We have 12 in Germany. It's a 12-year, I guess, fixed term total of 12 years, but in Italy it's 6 years. Can you just sort of expand a bit on that? I think it's interesting to compare the German and Italian examples.
Yeah, here I am. Thank you, Sarah, for your very interesting questions. They open topics which are pretty hot, actually. As long as concern the first question, which was about the statistics of precarious workers in the university, statistics of maybe 2 years ago, tells that the 60% of the teaching contracts are upon precarious workers. And I think that this number is pretty impressive because it tells us that the universities go on because of the precarious people, because the university is on our shoulders. And I think that this is an impressive number, of course. The 60% is an incredible statistics. As long as concern the meritocratic rhetoric beyond the Gelmini reform, actually it was based on the notion of excellence, and it was the ideological justification for making the cutting of all the financing. So the idea was we are going to award only the best researchers, and beyond this idea, there was the idea of cutting every kind of financing to all the rest of the system. And this is pretty impressive because it goes across different levels. So this happened in terms of students. So only the meritocratic students were in right to have scholarships and things like that. And these have generated many problems of social exclusion from the academic systems and from the affordability point of view. This was something that we as a researcher, I was not a researcher in the time I was a student, to be honest, but as researchers are of course involved in this meritocratic rhetoric, which awards only the excellent ones. And the idea was to close some line of research, to cut research lines in terms of pluralism of the knowledge, as we said. But this mechanism also created many damages for the university themselves. For example, in Italy, we had many problems in terms of gap between small and big universities, and furthermore, in terms of gap between universities of the north of the country and of the southern one, which have been strongly penalized. And so this is, as long as concern the question about the contracts in Italy, after the PhD, we have a obscure pattern before the tenure track, because there are 6 years of postdoc contracts. I can accumulate at the maximum 6 years of postdoc contracts. After that, you are not yet tenured. There is a position which is called ricercatore a tempo determinato di tipo A. So it is temporary assistant researcher of type A, and then we have these temporary assistant researchers of type B, and then only after that we have the tenure track position. And therefore, after the PhD, you can accumulate something like currently 12 years of precarious contract. But this is under discussion with the new reform, which is in the parliament now. So this may change a bit, but the numbers are between the 12 and the 15 years of precarious contract after the PhDs, which are an incredible number, because if you end up a PhD and you are 30, you are stable at 45, and this is totally crazy, I think. Thank you, Sarah, for giving me the opportunity of talking about these things.
Thanks a lot, Eleonora. I loved the obscure pattern, really. It spoke to my heart. I just wanted to ask a quick question to Teresa and Aline, and then I will give floor to Isola because she was raising her hand. You gave some numbers and percentages at one point in your presentation, and you said like 57% of researchers do precarious work for at least 5 years in their career. I wanted to ask, what happens next? I mean, do they all get tenure or do they just drop out? What happens to this 57%?
I think that's not what, hang on, I'm trying to find the slides. No, there had been at that point already precarious for that amount of time. But I don't know if that's the slide that was on gender. Hang on. Trying to pick that up.
There was a slide with the percentages, like you said, 63% is working on hourly paid jobs. 62% of those are female, and you said 57% of researchers do precarious work for more than 5 years. Sorry, for more than 5 years. And what percentage of those get tenure, or do we know how many of them drop out because they can't find tenure jobs? Like, what happens to them?
Okay, hang on, I have it now. So there had been at the point of the point they took part in the study precarious for at least 5 years, which we thought was significant in the sense that, you know, it just shows that it's not just a temporary transition, just a short thing before getting a job. What happened to them, we actually didn't trace them, but we're now interviewing people who've been precarious for longer than that again. We actually don't know what's the proportion of people who eventually get a job. I don't know, Teresa. I don't think we have that information. I don't think that's something we can find anywhere. I know that in the UK, there's a researchers association that produced a graph, and you know, with big arrows to show the kind of, you know, attrition as they call it, and it was only a tiny number. It was what, like 1% or something of PhD holders who ended up becoming professors. I mean, I don't remember exactly, but it was really, really tiny compared to those who kind of, you know, evaporated. In Ireland, we don't have those figures, and we're nowhere near having those figures at all, because there's not even any way to record what people do after their PhDs. Not at institutional level, not at national level. I don't think anybody does that. I think the ERC had started or had promised something on that, but never materialized even. That's the body that gives a few grants to PhD students, not even all of them. No, it's hard to tell. I mean, now in our circles, I mean, anecdotally and from our research, we know lots of people who have left academia, and more, you know, as time goes on.
Can I quickly jump in with that one thing? I mean, in Germany, concerning many aspects of the problems that we are dealing with, we have very good information, and this is really I would say one of the main factors next to organizing more, that we could organize it, we could scandalize things, because there's a regular reporting on academic careers, on the numbers of academics, of projects, of funding, and so on. So just one example, I mean, the most terrible thing is the more than 90% in fixed term contracts. Another number that is quite impressive is that in the German system, where you don't only have the PhD, but also this second or this next exercise, the habilitation, which finally entitles you to become a professor. At this stage, still you have a relation of 4-to-1 between those who are formally entitled to have a professorship and who would like to have a professorship, on those on the other side, the free professorships. So I mean, this is really the last bottleneck of many other bottlenecks, but still at this very last step, it's 4-1.
If I could come in here with 2 points there as well. In terms of the Irish data, universities and the Department well, we have a new Department of Further and Higher Education. They deliberately obscure the data on, well, they refuse to collect it, and that's a deliberate act, because then they don't have to report on it. And when they do report on it, they report on it in terms of full-time equivalences. So they don't measure it in terms of people, they measure it in terms of the number of full-time kind of hours that it takes within that particular within particular institutions or whatnot. So there's actually no numbers, and this is something that we've been really trying to push. There's no collection of data either within individual universities or nationally by the Department of Further and Higher Education itself. Oftentimes there was a system, especially for hourly pay, and this is where the biggest problem is, because this is stuff that is the most precarious, the least protected by any employment legislation, but it is also the type of work that is done to carry out core teaching functions and the bulk of teaching across Irish higher education institutions. And so these people are particularly invisible and hard to reach because some of the work is done for free, or the timesheets are things that are, like, say, taken out of professors' research budgets, masked as, research or certain types of work, and they generally don't have contracts. In some places this is changing, and they're getting contracts for doing hourly paid work, but again, that's not true across the board. So it's a huge issue, I suppose.
Thanks a lot. I sort of wanted to ask something, and then we're going to take a break for an hour and meet again at 4 p.m. Central European time. So I sort of, please go ahead, and then we'll say goodbye for a short time.
So thank you again for all this insight. I just want to point out that given all the neoliberal capitalist agenda, the language that they use, the structure that they claim to have, academia from Italy to Germany and probably Ireland too, from what I understand, is really governed by incredible government regulation. And it's not at all left to the market. I'm not saying that it would be better if it were left to the market. I'm just saying that all this talk about meritocratic competition, market competition and all that, but it's so regulated only to the detriment of academic workers though. It's regulated to disadvantage us. So that's very interesting that the government steps in, specifically passes legislation, creates labor market conditions, and create funds to harm academic laborers, and regulates it to death in a way that it doesn't regulate any other sector. So this is very remarkable. That the government's approach is that not actually neoliberal at all. It's very statist. It's very quasi markets, and but the language used is completely different. The second thing I gleaned from all of this is it's also that this kind of precarity only applies to academic labor at the university, but it doesn't apply to any other labor at the university. So the secretariat, they have permanent contracts, and the people that organize this university, the system, the people that decide what merit is, they have permanent contracts. Nobody decides about their merit and their ability to decide on those things. They don't get fixed term contracts, which is very interesting, that people with permanent contracts watch us and basically decide how we're doing most of the time. And the third point is, I had something very important I want to say, and now it's like, I just want to say, by the way, closed captioning wrote tenure process as dental procedure. And I was like, yes, this is very accurate. So anyways, I think I can't remember the third thing I was going to say right now. But I want to second the time factor. When we came to Germany because of political reasons, the people that actually supported us for those political reasons came to us and told us that now leave politics aside, because this is Germany, you don't have time if you want to get a job. So, you know, this was like fascinating. Like you can't do politics in Turkey because of the political situation. And in Germany, they say, welcome here. You can't do politics here because you don't have the time. And if you want to be an academic, you can't do politics. It's one or the other. So, you know, we're forced into these things. And oh yeah, I remember the third thing. The third thing is there are so many mechanisms to accredit universities, a million metrics for measuring success. And none of these in any country actually include who does the teaching, on what terms, how much they get paid, as if that's not part of the quality of teaching that a university can provide. Somebody who gets less than 400 euros a month in Germany does most of the teaching at a German university on average. I mean, imagine that nobody gets paid that little in Germany. Normally in Holland, you know, all these things that we've talked about, but this is not part of the accreditation process. This is not part of the metric that measures university success. Very conveniently, just put aside. And that's also crazy, because this is something, maybe if they want to measure everything, why are they not measuring this? So that's the last thing I want to say. And thank you again so much for this very enlightening series of both questions and answers.
So thank you all for a great session. Like I can't get enough of this discussion actually, and I still have things to add, but we also need to take a break.